welcome to chapter 3, the end of it. So we've made our way through some topics that mainly talked about the device screen and how big it is and how we deal with the fact that every device seems to have a different size screen, both in terms of inches and or in terms of pixels or pixel density. And so it becomes an issue when we're trying to write an app that we want to sell, we want to sell, or we want to have lots of users be able to use it and have it look correct, have it look right, have it not look, odd or stretched. So we talked about some options in doing that, and largely the solution is we don't design it for a particular phone or a particular device. We design our apps for sort of a virtual content area, a space, a certain number of pixels wide and a certain number of pixels tall. And then we leave it to Corona or Solar 2D to scale it and make it look okay on most devices that might run it. This is not perfect. There are some tricks and tips we'll get to over the next several weeks to help us help Corona, help Solar 2D make this work well. All right, so fonts. Well, I think we did start talking about this, if my memory serves okay. The issue is everybody loves fonts. In this class, we'll make use of, some wizard school, Harry Potter-ish kind of fonts for fun. The problem is, just like in desktop computing, is you can't count on your users having access to weird fonts or fancy fonts or however you want to say that. There's a default installation of fonts on different devices. And of course, there's very little overlap between the devices. So if you're developing for iOS, you have a pretty wide palette of fonts available to you to choose from. They're not largely the same fonts that would be on Android. And even on Android, it's difficult to count on anything but a really core set of standard fonts that you have to choose from. For the time being, the caution would be, as you're designing your homework maybe, or when we get onto the team projects and your sharing work, if you've picked a font that's on your computer and it looks awesome on your computer, you're just not guaranteed that it's actually going to show up on your teammate's computer, let alone your end user's computer. And the other caution would be that the fonts that are listed and work on your development computer may not work on the mobile device. So just because it works on your machine, on your development computer, on your laptop, whatever it is, does not mean it will work correctly for the end users. And that can be confusing because as you pick fonts, or you look for fonts on your system, or you use Drawn2Code and pull up the font settings menu, it lists all the fonts available on your computer. It isn't able to filter for what might or might not be on your end users' computers, if that makes sense. So you can ask your computer in your mobile app for a list of the fonts. And this is the basic code to do that. So I thought let's do that. And then you'll see what's on my computer. And if you follow along and do it on your computer, you'll see what's on your computer and maybe get a better sense of the limits of the fonts you can choose from. To enter just a bit of kind of arbitrary code like that, we'll use a snippet. I'll add a new snippet and see if I can arrange my screen with both of these visible. All right. So what we're going to do is just type in that code. So just really briefly, what we're doing with the syntax is we're getting what is going to end up being a table called font names, and we're setting it equal to the result of this expression on the right-hand side of the equal sign. And so on the right-hand side of the equal sign, we're calling the native table, which is one of the big tables that we use to get features out of Corona Solar 2D. Inside of the native table, there's a function called getFontNames, which will return a table of font names. So all that syntax is doing is having Corona ask for the fonts that are installed and to get a list of them. I can do a quick print just to see how many we've got. So we'll say number of fonts equals, and then here's a little bit of cool Lua syntax. For a simple table, you can get the size of the table just by using the pound sign and then the table name. So pound, this bit of syntax here, pound font names, should return an integer index number, which is the number of values in the table, or in this case would be the number of fonts that are installed on your system. So we can run that and test it, see if I've made a mistake already or not. So I'm going to head to the code and I'm going to save it and run it. There we go. So if you're looking at, on my system at least, it says there's over 1,300 fonts. That'll be, of course, counting variations of fonts like the bold version, the italic version, you know, the whatever, the thin version, the medium weight version, the heavyweight version, whatever. Some fonts have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, different variations. So I don't think I really have over 1,300 unique fonts on my system. Well, we'll see when we list them. I think we'll probably see what I mean when we list. I'm wondering how many fonts you guys have. Anybody have more? All right. Getting the list of fonts will be a useful thing to know how to do. So we haven't covered loops. You know, this is our first actual use of a loop that's doing anything. So it's a for loop. I'm going to say for j equals 1 to there, pound font names, do an end. So I've just typed in the basic syntax to create a for loop. I'm using a counter. I call it j, and you might wonder why I didn't call it I. The problem is on my computer when I type I, it normally capitalizes it because it thinks it's being helpful. So in general, when I'm actually typing code, I avoid I so that I don't get a capitalized version of it everywhere. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is inside the loop, this loop is going to, based on a counter, it's going to go from the integer number 1 to that 1,380 number that you just saw. One by one, the counter is j will count up one by one each time, and then we're going to use the counter j to access a particular font in font names. So I'm going to say print font names j. All right, let's save it and see what we get. There we go. Okay, so yeah, it's a lot of fonts. And apparently it's, you know, Lua, Corona, Solar 2D, whatever, is seeing all of these weird hidden fonts. They start with a dot. And later in the semester, when we cover the Lua, the scrolling list as a Solar 2D widget, I create a version of an app that lists all the fonts, and I filter out any fonts that you shouldn't be seeing, like these dot ones. I haven't done it here just because it's not really relevant, but you can see all of the stuff that's on your computer, I hope. All right, let me switch back. All right. So I have this cool slide, which is like an Inception slide that I don't know if that's what's showing up for you, but it's a screen share within a screen share within a screen share within a screen share. It's not there for any purposes, but that I thought it was cool. All right. In addition to setting the font, you can also set the color that the text is drawn in. So there's a function set text color, and you pass it 3 or 4, or actually you can pass it 1, 2, 3, or 4 parameters. The most common thing that we do is send it three numbers, which are RGB values for the color. That is the amount of red, the amount of green, and the amount of blue in the color. You can also send it a 4th integer, which is the alpha or transparency of the text. So if you want your text to be tinted a certain color and also fade it out so that you can see through it a bit. You can add a fourth integer to it. This is obviously super easy to do in Drawn2Code. Once we put text on screen, text display object, we'll get a settings panel, and the settings panel allows us to easily change the font selected and the text color. So let's do that. So you'd add text to the screen using display objects, text, and bam, there's text on the screen. I'm going to delete that snippet since it's a loop that eats up a little bit of time. And then here's the settings panel, the partial screenshot of which is in the keynote slides we just looked at. In addition to having complete control of the text itself and the font, here's the font settings dialog. You guys have seen this pop up before, and here's where all of these fonts are listed. I have complete control over all of this stuff. I think we talked about this last time. If you make the font larger so that the text doesn't fit in it, you're going to want to go back and adjust the width and the height. So I've actually picked a font size that's a little bit too big, so we'll fix that. All right, there's a hello world in text, and I've used a font that probably will not work on your machines unless you happen to have a Mac, and even then, it would depend on the version of the operating system and what other software you've installed. But the color is what we wanted to hit. So you hit text color, and you can make this do any color that you want. And let's peek at the code that was generated. So the syntax for creating this text is a settings table, which includes location, font, and font size, as well as text alignment. And then here on line 26, there's the set text color. So this is object 2 in my stack. If you just started with this, it might be object 1. If you have been playing around with a couple of things as I've been talking, maybe it's object 5. I don't know, but set text color is called on object 2 using the syntax object identifier colon function name set text color inside of parentheses 4 values, which is the amount of red, the amount of green, the amount of blue, and the alpha. So this is no red, quite a bit of green, a little bit of blue, fully on screen, fully opaque. So text display objects can also be manipulated later. As an example, if you wanted to change the color of the text there, we could do that relatively easily. Let's do that. This is kind of like what we did last time. So if I add the tap listener, if we add a listener and select tap, so if you're following along, all I did was hit the add listener button for the text, and I added the tap listener. And then we're going to get into this snippet and edit it. So if I want to change the text color for object 1 when it's tapped, I would do that in here. So I would say object, or for me it's object 2. Again, if you're following along, it might not be that same number. It is, you can hover over it and see what the object is, or you can look up in the stack and see what object you're trying to work with. For me, it's object 2. So I'll say object 2, set fill color. And then let's change it to red. So we'll say 1, 0, 0. So that is all red, no green, no blue. And if I save it, there we go. So there's our app. It says hello world. If we tap it, it should change it to red. If you wanted to make it a little more fun, maybe you could, instead of setting it to 100, you could use a random number generator. I think in Lua we can just use math.random. Spinning beach ball of death. There we go. Hello world. There we go. So as you tap now, you should get wonderful random colors each tap. So the other thing that people try to do or want to be able to do sometimes is, what if I also want to change the font? What if I also want to change the font size, or obviously the font name, the font style? So all of that is fixed. Once you create a text display object in Solar 2D, you can change the color, you can do stuff with it, you can change the position, you can change the transparency, you can change the order in the stack, you can change all sorts of stuff about it, but you cannot change the font. If you really needed to change the font, you would have to essentially recreate it as a new text display object in the font that you want. All right. So lines are also a pretty common thing to want to be able to draw. Solar 2D has a built-in new line function in the display table. It takes 4 integer values. That's the 2 XY coordinates of the start and the end of the line. A couple things to know. The XY coordinate system starts here in the upper left-hand corner. So for instance, when you added Hello World in Drawn2Code, it put it in the center of the screen. So if you peek back in your code, you'll see that Hello World probably is still at 320 or 160 by 240. So if you're not used to this coordinate system, it is a little backwards. X counts positively to the right, Y counts positively down. Drawn2Code supports lines, obviously. As a default line, it draws a short diagonal line. If you head back to Drawn2Code and you're in the display objects palette here, you'll see one of the things you can add, the most basic of the shapes, is a line, and it drops it there in the center of the screen. I'm going to make Hello World invisible and hide invisible objects so that it goes away. I could just delete it out of my stack, but if you have stuff in your stack that you want to show and hide as you're working on the design, you can make the object not visible and then toggle this show hide button. So there's the line. It's a short diagonal line. It's located, the center of the line is in the center of the content area, although it's a little hard, it's a little subtle, but there's a slight light gray line that runs across this simulated content area, and you can see the white line goes right through it. So you edit lines by changing the XY values at each end. So if you want to get a line that goes across the display, you're going to have to move the X value, starting value, to less than 0, and the ending value of the X to something greater than 320. And then for a horizontal line, obviously you want the Y values to be the same, whatever it is. I should be able to drag it and put it, once I have the shape I want, put it wherever I want. So there's a horizontal line that's going through Y value 240, Y value 240. So it's horizontal and it's cutting through the horizontal center of the content area. You can change the color of the line, but there is no separate fill color. So if you want, for instance, a red line, you can change the line color. But you can't say, as you can with the other display objects, you can't say, except for text as well, but you can't say I want a red outline with a white center, because lines don't have centers or to fill. You can change the stroke, which will get you a fatter line, which is kind of nice. If you're coming from Java, you couldn't do that in Java. All right. So finding the center. The center obviously is in the middle of the display, and we run into this issue of all displays are different, so knowing the actual pixel values is difficult. We overcome that again by using this content area, and whatever the content area is set at, we know what the XY value of the center is, and for Drawn2Code that's going to be 160 over and 240 down. as halfway over to the right, halfway down from the top in terms of the size of the content area. You can also, if you're coding by hand, it might be useful to get those values programmatically. So built into Solr 2D, into the display table, are two constants, display.contentCenterX and display.contentCenterY. So you can use those easily to handwrite code and put stuff centered on screen without having to think about necessarily the actual pixel values involved. And there is a button in Drawn2Code set up to facilitate doing that. If you are working by hand, you can add these display constants and a few others to your stack just by hitting the display constants button. And then if you are handwriting code in a snippet later and you want to get access to the center of the screen, you can refer to it easily as you type it in by CX and CY. Again, obviously the only time these are helpful or useful is if you're in a snippet and you're coding it by hand. So kind of like we just did with changing the fill color of the text, we had to get into the snippet and we had to type some code. So if we were also moving the text around, changing its XY values, and we wanted to bring it, for instance, back to the center, we could do that easily with CXCY. Let's just do it really quickly. So I'll just leave the line there. I'm going to pull our text back in. So I'm going to make it visible. And now this show high doesn't do anything because nothing in the design is hidden. But I'm going to move hello world. So I'm going to move it up to something close to the top of the screen. And that's going to butt up against the status bar. So let me show you now, while it makes sense, how to get rid of the status bar. So the status bar is this text up at the top of the phone. And it's easy enough to control. In Actions, there's a Set Status Bar button. You hit it, you get a script object in your stack, Set Status Bar. It's not entirely important where you put it in the stack, but for stuff that I mean to run as the app starts, I normally put it up at the top of the stack because that'll run first. That said, unless you have a really long stack, you could put it at the end and the user's never going to see the status bar. It's not like the status bar will sit there for 10 seconds and then finally disappear. In this stack, it certainly wouldn't make any difference. If I want to hide the status bar though, I need to head to the settings panel and switch it to hidden. You might have been able to figure that out on your own without me showing you, but hidden's the setting that will make it go away. So just to save it and double check. So it's off the screen a little bit, and this is where the height setting here plays a role. So to make it truer, to match truer to what's actually on screen, you'll want to decrease the font height until it's touching the bottom of the lower letters. Let's see if that fixes it. All right, so it's on screen now and certainly close. All that means essentially is that Drawn2Code is not doing the same job, is not calculating the font in the same way the Solr 2D simulator is, and so whatever it shows up in the simulator as, that's what it will on the actual device, and you want to make it look correct on the simulator. And sometimes that means that the design in Drawn2Code deviates slightly from what you end up actually seeing, and that's why testing is so important. We've still got our tap to change the color working, but I said let's change the position as well. So I want to get back into that snippet, but in preparation for doing that, if I want to use those display constants, I'm going to head over to Snippets, and the first predefined snippet is display constants. I'm going to hit display constants to put them in my stack. I'm going to move it up to the top of the stack. I'm going to option up click, and let's peek at it. So here in the generated code are 4 variables set up, CXCY, which take on the values of the content center X and the content center Y, and CW and CH, which take on the values, the width and the height. So now programmatically, I can use CX and CY, for instance, to center something really easily. So hopping back into the snippet, I want to change the position of my text display object back to the center of the screen. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to name the object, object2 in my case, .x equals CX, and object2.y equals CY. That should jump me to the center on the first tab. There we go. Okay, so if it works when I tap it, or if you're following along, if you're playing along at home, then when you tap it, it should change to a random color and jump to the center of the screen, which it does. So the display constants are helpful in this scenario where you're doing stuff by hand inside of a snippet, inside of a default snippet, inside of a snippet you've added to manipulate stuff on screen after creation programmatically. I don't want to rush over it, but I also want you guys to be comfortable doing some of the stuff. You know, we'll lean on Drawn2Code fairly heavily to do a lot of the code for us, but in the end, inevitably, we're going to have to be typing in snippets to add some reaction that we want, for instance, to a button press, to a tap, to some other event, to make our app do what we want it to do. Right, so you can change colors lots of different ways. For text, it's set text color. For all the other display shapes like circles and squares and stuff and rounded rectangles, you can use set fill color and set stroke color. Again, in Drawn2Code, you'll have two buttons for something like a circle, and one of them will be the fill color and one of them will be the stroke color. The only caution is that for the display shapes, like a circle or a square or a rounded rectangle, whatever it is, a polygon, the default stroke width is 0 in Solar 2D. So all it means is if you create something on screen like say a circle, and you want to change it so that the fill color is orange and the stroke color is, what goes with orange? Red, I don't know. When you do that, when you make that change and run it, you won't see the red. You won't see the outline because the stroke is set to a 0 as a default value. The solution obviously is super easy. You just increase the stroke value. Drawn2Code has a slider to let you do that. But it's one of these things you can, certainly when you're programming by hand, you can get stuck on, because then you start worrying, well, did I mistype? Is it not stroke color? Maybe it was line color. Maybe it was outline color. What was it? You start second guessing every aspect of what you had typed. If you are on the live Zoom call, I told you I would get you guys extra galleons if you were able to show up and participate in the live Zoom meeting in some way. So if you want a participation galleon for today, you will want to be on and have your camera on. All right, it's done. Okay, so I covered the status bar because it made sense to earlier. Just as a quick review, there's a button inside of Actions called Set Status Bar. If you hit that, you get a script object, a Set Status Bar script object, and then you can pick from the available Solar 2D styles. There are more options now than there have been, which is nice. You're actually seeing the status bar there, but it's really tough to see because I have a black background, so it's a black text on a black background. So just to see it, I'm going to add a rectangle and pop it up here. That should let you see it. But it's completely possible that some of the status bars will not change correctly in the simulator, and it's just that's why we test it and test it and test it, and then when you get to the point where you want to see it on the next step closer, you can test it on either the Android emulator or the iOS device simulator. they both tend to be very true to what you would actually, especially the iOS one is, I don't think I've ever seen a difference between what you saw on the Apple's actual iOS device simulator and on an actual device. Okay, a bit deeper on flow of execution. So one of the things as you learn to program, you start to develop an understanding of, an appreciation of, sort of a feel for is the order in which stuff gets done. Obviously, the order the stuff gets done in is driven by two things: by the code that you've written and the location you've placed it from a top-down standpoint in your script or in Drawn2Code in your script stack. Lua Solar 2D starts at the top and works its way down. We've talked about some of this, and so I do keep bringing it up just because it's one of these things that, in your third or fourth language or whatever, this just starts to make intuitive sense and you hardly even think about it. But then to new programmers, I know that it doesn't always make intuitive sense. So I have an example here of some script that you might write. It involves a little bit of math because it's easy to think about and talk about. But so I've got 3 lines. These are 3 valid Lua statements: y equals x plus 10, x equals 5, print y equals ... y, which is just print the text literal y equals appended to the variable, the current value of the variable y. So all 3 of those are valid Lua statements. The issue is if you do try to run that, you're going to get an error. So let me switch back to the screen sharing and just see. What I'll need is a snippet, new snippet. So I want to type some script statements and then see the results. So what I had was something like y equals x plus 10 and x equals 5, and then print y equals ... y. So again, these are all valid script statements. So you look at it and you think, well, that's a valid script then. But you're going to run into trouble. So let's save it and see the trouble we run into. Hopefully it matches the error message I've got in the keynote. So it says, attempt to perform arithmetic on global x a nil value. And it tells us the line number 15. So there's great information here in the error message that you want to learn to look for. If you go all the way to the bottom of the console, you get essentially the same error message at the console, and the console nicely actually highlights it in red, so it's hard to miss. It's easy to miss if your console isn't scrolled to the bottom, like mine wasn't. Otherwise, when you do something like this, you should get definitely this error message at the console, and maybe also a pop-up as well from the simulator. So, well, let's look at line 15. It says the line number is 15. That's where it's running into trouble. Yeah, that's not actually where the issue is, though. So sometimes the line number is off. Sometimes the line number is one past or 1 or 2 past where the actual error is. The issue here really starts on line 13. And I'm trying to use a variable x in my statement. So my statement says y equals x plus 10. Problem is, what's in x? I haven't defined x. The issue is there is no result, there is no valid result for y. As a result of line 13, the value of y is nil because it couldn't do the math. And then when we try to do something with y, it's unable to make that concatenation work. That's what's triggering the error. The issue here again is these are 3 valid statements. They're perfectly fine statements. They're not in the right order. If I want to use a variable in an expression, I have to have given it a value somewhere previous in my code. If I haven't given it a value and I just pluck it out of thin air and use it in an equation, it's not going to work. So the fix is to move or to reorder the statements. So I want x to have a value, And then for Lua to be able to use that in this expression and have it be not nil, to do that, I've got to give it a value. It doesn't have to be 5. It could be 0. It just has to be something. That should make the error go away. There we go. Okay, so no errors. And at the console, I don't know if you can see this, it says y equals 15. This is one of these things that it trips everybody up. It absolutely can trip experienced programmers up as well. If it seems at all unclear, a little bit vague, it becomes clear with practice, and it becomes clearer, as for me at least, as I make mistakes and then have to fix them and hunt it down, and then I realize, oh, I didn't set that variable up. Or sometimes it's a step more sophisticated than that, which is I set the variable up, but I didn't set it up in the right spot in the code so that I can access it. And that's what we're going to move on to next, is the idea of scope or visibility. You can use variables, assuming you've created them and initialized them properly. The syntax for doing that and the requirements for doing that depend on the language, but in general, you have to declare it with a name, a valid identifier, and then using the assignment operator for the language, you'll give it some initial value that's valid. After that, typically, you can use it when you want to use it. However, depending on the location in your code, the variable may be additionally restricted in terms of its usability. And this is referred to as scope or visibility. If you try to, generally speaking, if you try to use a variable outside of scope, it's one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to get an error like we just saw, which is a nil error of some sort, or depending on how you've written and how you're doing it, you may end up creating a second copy of the variable, a second copy that's local to where you're coding, but it'll be a second variable. It won't be the same variable. So you can have variables of the same name in your script at the same time, because not all variables have the full scope of the entire script. For instance, when we did that loop, we had a variable counter called I. That's local to the loop. I can create another loop right after that and use J again, and it's a different instance of J. So same thing here, just to start to become aware of. The big limiter is, well, a variable's only in scope after you declare and define it. So top down, if you don't define and declare a variable into the 10th line of your script, you can't use it on lines 1 through 9 because it hasn't been created yet. Second thing is variables that are defined inside of functions. So for instance, we're working with the default snippet earlier for that text display object. If we created a variable inside that snippet, we could then use it after declaring it inside the snippet, but it would not be visible outside of the snippet. So just start to being aware of this fact that in addition to the syntax of individual statements, the position in the code matters a great deal as well. And if you were following along, you made some text that both changed colors when it was tapped and also changed location when it was tapped. All right, that's where I want to wind up today, but in summary, mobile device screens are typically rectangles. They have a certain number of pixels width and a certain number of pixels height. The 0, 0 location, the reference point, is the top left corner. By default in Solar 2D, you've learned a bit about setting colors and RGB values today. And I hope you've thought more about top to bottom flow of execution and the role of the location in your code and how that drives the scope of visibility for variables that you might want to use.